Hello and welcome to World Civilization 2. We are on chapter 32 this week, and we are taking a look at Europe's new ideas. And the first thing I wanted to start off with was two of our vocabulary words, our history analysis words. And by the way, my name is Jennifer Hobson Plattner, and I am teaching you online today. So right here, we have talked about two words, hierarchy and democratization, and I just want to talk about those before we get into the PowerPoint. So we have over here, hierarchy is where people are given different values, and the serfs here, that's the masses, and they're given a value of pretty much nothing, and they're not allowed to leave. They're not allowed to leave the land. They're underneath the knights, the nobles, and the kings and the lords, and they pretty much control them completely. And it's really about power. Here we have democratization, democracy. This is what we're heading for. Of course, in our country, we don't have it yet. But this is where no matter what your gender is, man or woman, or your sexual preference, whether, who you choose to love, you still get the same equality. You're on a line of equality. Your race, religion, thoughts, ideas, are all supposed to be equally given equal power under the law. And are we there in the U.S. yet? No, we aren't. But that's what we're shooting for, and it's important to know that that's what democracy truly means. Okay, we're going to talk about ancient regime. The ancient regime is this old hierarchy of power. And the ancient regime, the nobles and the kings and the lords, they don't want to let go. So they're doing whatever they can. And so obviously, that's very problematic, and there's obviously a huge conflict. So that's what you will see, lots of revolutions in this chapter. Okay, so these are words that you are supposed to know, and we've gone over. Super. I'm going to pause, and I'll be right back with our PowerPoints. Okay, we are back now with our PowerPoint. Europe, new ideas, and a new nation. All right. The chapter chronology, economic liberalism, socialism emerges, July Revolution, which only lasted for a little while. Let's see, Reform Acts in Great Britain, which really kept them out of a huge revolution because they really listened to their lower classes. Louis Napoleon, the Second Empire, Crimean War, unification of Italy, freeing of the serfs in Russia, unification of Germany, which was part of that was Prussia. Liberalism in politics and economics. Political changes affected the economic development, affected politics in the 19th century. The Enlightenment and the French Revolution led to proposals eliminate property-based distinctions, share products of labor equally, respect civil liberties, eliminate restrictions of mercantilism. This is a romantic piece of art, and Romanticism was art that was actually a response to the Industrial Revolution. And Romanticism, if you look up romantic art forms, it was trying to emphasize individualism, emotion, the glorification of the past. So emotions like beauty in nature, the sublime, horror, or terror. So you can kind of see this in this painting, The Wanderer, in the Sea of Clouds by Caspar Friedrich, was the best known and possibly the most technically accomplished of the early generation of Romantic painters. He painted this brooding introspective work in 1818. Oh, and Romanticism was from 1800 to 1850. Gospel of Free Enterprise, economic liberalism from Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, laissez-faire, free trade, limited government, different essays that people were writing. You have to understand those, that this did build a lot of greedy capitalism. Greedy capitalism was starting to emerge where, people were getting their hands on factory ownership and using the masses and the poor for their own gain. And they were actually, there was this trend that really was never before, where they were blaming the poor for being poor, in his the Iron Law of Wages, because of their high birth rate and that sort of thing. And what's amazing today, if you really study why the poor are poor, it's due to education and education opportunities. The poor are poor because they have no access to higher education or more education or good education. So it's really, you've got to be super careful, just, going with society trends and following the facts. And that's what we try to do more of in history. Okay, conservatism. Basic beliefs in conservatism were tied to the church, wanting to have a church still in charge of a country, which is really kind of strange from what, today's conservatism, where it came from. Official religion is needed. Moderate conservatism, Britain and France. They were appalled by Jacobin radicalism and Napoleonic arrogance. Wanted to prevent revolutions that brought chaos and war. Okay. Reactive conservatism, Prussia, Austria, and Russia. All right. And Tsar Nicholas, did some amazing things. Because he had some choices to make due to serfdom. Nationalism. Nationalism, you have to be super careful, because a lot of times nationalism really is talking about the ethnic group that's larger. And sometimes even though a nation is everyone who lives there, all the religions that live there, all the ethnicities that live there, a lot of times there's this us and them paradigm, where you're not looking at each other like simply in America, that we're all Americans and we all have different colors and faces and beliefs and ideas, but you're choosing one over the other. And that's where it really gets dangerous. Nationalism really gets dangerous as we walk into World War I. Okay, early nationalism was tolerant and was inspired by unity. Later nationalism was negative and cultural superiority, chauvinistic, and xenophobic. That's actually very well written. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay, let's keep going. Nationalism. Romantic movement, we already talked about that. Reaction against rationalism, emphasized feelings, emotions, intuition, and individualism, and it was a reaction against the Industrial Revolution. George Gordon, Lord Byron, poetry. All right. Socialism in the pre-Marx era, utopian socialist thought, a planned economy, greater equality, ownership. Industrialization would eliminate scarcity, and government should look out for the less fortunate. Okay. Political events to 1848. The Alliance. Commitment goals to the Quadruple Alliance. Okay. The Liberal States, France. The Revolution of 1830. Almost bloodless. July monarchy. King accepted moderate liberal constitution. So he was calling himself the citizen king. Louis Philippe was. He was trying to walk a middle road. Didn't quite work, but he was trying to be a different kind of monarch, because the people did not want the old kind, the ancient regime. Liberal states, Great Britain, the Reform Act, huge, avoided a huge dangerous revolution. This timely reforms, it helped the middle class and had a peaceably orderly change. They listened to their people. Political events of 1848. Prussia, which was not Germany yet, and Austrian Empire really were trying to struggle and separate from each other. Well, Prussia was. Reactionary states, rulers trying to squelch liberalism. It did not work out well. Political events of 1848. Byron as the Giaour. The portrait was painted in 1813, shortly after Lord Byron returned from his tour of the Near East, which produced several of his best poems and established his fame. Revolt of 1848. Outbreak. First revolt began in Paris. Revolts broke out numerous places by spring. 1848 was a revolutionary year. Revolts initially led by the middle-class liberals, workers disappointed with leadership, and they weren't treated well at all. Capitalism took off, but capitalism was not being fair and equal. And, without without strong guidelines, capitalism can be extremely greedy and build nations on the backs of oppression, or, be oppressive. Consequences of Revolution of 1848. Splits occurred between middle class and workers. That's probably the biggest consequence. Okay, you have France Second Republic replaced the monarchy. Louis Napoleon elected president, but soon he became the emperor. He was elected. He knew how to manipulate that fine line between democracy and dictatorship. Right. Austria crushed national revolts of the Czechs, Hungarians, Italians. Italian states, liberals hoped to unite under the Sardinia, Piedmont. Anti-papal, anti-Austrian riots broke out. So just, independence and, democracy was really just a trend. Russia's reforms. Tsar Alexander II, someone abolished serfdom. You couldn't leave the manor. It was just so restrictive, and you were not viewed as an individual. You were viewed as a massive of a people that could be abused, used for, gain and wealth, and not as an individual. Okay. France, Franco-Prussian War, which was between France and Germany in 1870. Paris Commune was an attempt at a socialist revolution. So for 4 months, some liberals were in charge and they wouldn't recognize the monarchy. Army crushed the Commune, showed split between conservative countryside and radical urban workers. The Third Republic. France hoped to regain revenge on Bismarck's Germany, wanted to regain lost provinces of Alsace and Lorraine. And France began to acquire colonies. So they're freeing themselves and their own people, but then they're enslaving others. And, colonization sounds like a beautiful word, but it's really just not. It's just all about oppression, going into a country, taking it over, and taking all their resources. Okay. Russia. All right, the unification of Germany, the Italy Peninsula. All right. Okay, our next slide is of Florence Nightingale, which is super interesting. She was of a wealthy English family, and she went and became a nurse. She had to go to Germany, and she was called the Lady with a Lamp because she would make those nightly rounds and see her patients. So the Crimean War broke out in 1854, and she went against her parents' wishes. But this was the first war that had telegraph and photograph. And so she found the army hospitals in absolute filth and disgust. And she became the superintendent of nurses of the British Army. And she sent pictures back of how filthy these hospitals were. And she said something so amazing. She said, if you give soldiers a book, a game, and a magic lantern, they will leave off the drinking. So if you give them something else to do and keep them healthy and clean. She wrote hundreds of books, and she was in what's present day Istanbul is where she had the army hospital that she participated in. We have the unification of Italy, Realpolitik. Camilla Cavour believed in Realpolitik, which was, it's actually a German word that just means actual politics, not just ideology, but the reality of it. You have the unification of Italy. All right. Unification of Germany, no longer Prussia. Multinational empire of Austria and Hungary, which are going from empires to nation states instead. And then we're going to end up with the United States in the industrial age. It changed dramatically. Population was greater than that of England after the Civil War. Workers in the U.S. generally fared better than in Europe. Towns offered democracy and social mobility. United States in the industrial age. And you have the modern nation state. Ethnic group nation exercises control over a territory or state through mass participation in the government, features mass political parties, mass school systems, and labor unions. Okay, And that is all for chapter 32.